I'm settled. I've arrived. I'm here in Israel, and I'm not looking to go anywhere else. The grass is not greener anywhere else. It's right here in front of you, and I have zero thought of going anything else.
Were you worried about your parnassah?
Yes, but you develop an extremely new sense of bitachon and amuna about parnassah. But I think the attitude where people are not taught that ultimately Eretz Yisrael is our final destination is where we get into problems. Because if people understood that, you don't have to get into all the geula talk and all the doomsday talk, and you don't have to get into any of that. Everyone has to know that Eretz Yisrael is a place where a Jew belongs, and it's a gift that Hashem gave us.
Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Stark Tank. Stark Tank is a podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a Ben Torah in the workforce. This week, we're being joined by Eli Freedman. He's the founder of Cork and Cellar Wine Club. We're going to get into all of that, talk about his Aliyah journey, a lot of other fascinating things about his life. So welcome, Eli. Thank you for joining us.
Shalom Aleichem. Thank you for having me.
So before we jump into it, we really have to start from the very beginning because we connected over LinkedIn, and it turns out, small world, that we grew up maybe like 4 houses away from each other, also a few decades away from each other, so didn't exactly overlap and playing basketball on the street with each other. But maybe tell us about what life was like growing up in Boston and how that was for you.
Growing up in Boston, I guess I didn't know anything else at the time. I went to Maimonides with your dad. Around when I got into 9th grade, I went away to yeshiva in New York. And there were no yeshivas in Boston at the time. Now there's a bunch of nice options there. But I went away to yeshiva. I spent 4 years in yeshiva in New York. After that, my parents wanted me to pursue a degree so that I could be successful. And I ended up going to yeshiva in Providence, Rhode Island, just a few minutes from Boston. I went to yeshiva over there, and I went to school at nighttime. I did a finance and accounting degree. And after that, I went to Shar Yelshuv in Far Rockaway, got married, and moved on with life.
And so that finance and accounting degree, did it serve you? Did you end up trying to start your career that way or no?
I wanted to be a financial analyst. I ended up trading on Wall Street for a few years, but wasn't really the lifestyle that I was looking for. I ended up moving to Canada, which I lived in Montreal. My wife is Canadian. She's from Winnipeg. I lived in Canada for over 20 years, raised most of our kids. We have 7 kids, Kanai Nahara. And that's when we come to Aliyah. About 3 years ago, we moved from Montreal to Israel.
So I'm sure it must have been hard making Aliyah after living your whole life in various hockey towns before making Aliyah from Boston to Montreal.
Well, thank God I'm not a hockey fan, and it was very exciting not to have to deal with snow and ice and minus 40 temperatures. I was a marathon runner for many years, and I used to have to go out early in the morning and freeze, minus 30 degrees out in the wintertime, training. But I'm really happy to enjoy the warm weather in Eretz Yisrael now.
Amazing. And just you said that you tried out the financial analyst world and it wasn't working for you. Can you tell us a little more about how it wasn't lining up with who you wanted to be and what your life was going to be like?
Well, I'm kind of what they call ADHD plus, and I kind of get tired of a certain career at a certain point, and I like to move on to something else. It was around the tech boom, the tech bubble busted, and I kind of like relaxing at nighttime. It was stressful. I don't really mind the stress, but it wasn't really what I was looking for long term. And what I did get into was day trading. It wasn't really, I was very successful at one point. I was very not successful at one point and decided to move on from there. Life as it may be, we decided to search for different pastures.
Amazing. So maybe let's fast forward to your Aliyah, but like the decision to make Aliyah, what was your life like? How many kids did you have? What were you doing professionally at that time before we get into the actual decision?
So I had zero intention to make Aliyah. I did not want to make Aliyah at all. My wife did, but she didn't bug me about it. She had gone to all the Nefesh B'Nefesh meetings. I had a glass company. We owned a house. We have 7 kids. And in the middle of COVID, our daughter got married. She came back from seminary early because seminary closed because of COVID. She came home very quickly, got engaged and married in the middle of COVID. Moved to Eretz Yisrael right after Sheva Brachos, and we were kind of still stuck in lockdowns in Canada. Almost a year later, she had her first child, our first grandchild, and I guess things started itching me that I wasn't able to, you raise your kids your whole life, and then they have grandkids, and then all of a sudden, you only get to see them once or twice a year. You kind of miss the whole point of life. So I'm not sure what happened, but one day, it was totally random. I just I finally decided that I want to make Aliyah. My mother-in-law, my father-in-law passed away. He's buried in Montreal. I went to her house before I came home, and I said, "Listen, I finally decided that I want to move to Eretz Yisrael. Do you want to come along with us? We're not going to go. We don't want to leave you behind." So she said, "If you go, I go." And I came home and I broke the wonderful news to my wife. There were shouts of joy everywhere, and from there, the rest is history. She said that she already had a file with Nefesh B'Nefesh. She just has to refresh it. At that point, we went full force into selling my business, selling our house, doing all the absurd paperwork. I would never make Aliyah again. It's the amount of paperwork that they expect of you. And during COVID, it was doubly as hard because you have to pull out documents that are totally old and you have to rely on FedEx and offices that are only open once a week and so on and so forth. But anyways, we got through that and here we are.
So this is like 2020, 2021, this whole process?
This is 2022. This is 2021. We got to Israel right before Tisha B'Av in 2022.
And it's interesting how you describe sort of the backdrop. COVID was a very intense time, challenging, also with its blessings. And we discussed a little bit on the podcast. Maybe specifically, you pointed out that you were in Canada. So was that a significantly different experience going through COVID as a Canadian? And how did that sort of influence and impact what your mindset was like?
Well, I became fed up with life in Canada, mostly because of COVID. Everything else was pretty nice. I didn't really have a Rav that I really connected with over the years. I was a very nice part of the community. We had a nice shul. And the COVID restrictions where there was just basically no school for a year and a half. There was lockdowns and curfews. It was extremely oppressive. The kids had to, sneak around just to go outside, get fresh air, go to school. Obviously, the schools didn't follow all the rules, thank God. So they had, there was like undercover school kind of sneaking in the back door and at some of the times the Rebbe's houses. So we just became more and more disenfranchised with life there, having no idea when I was going to stop and when I was going to start again, even if it did stop. And we decided that, we just have to go. I don't know if in Israel it was any easier. From what I understand, that they were pretty strict over here. But anyways, we just kind of, I guess, got to the point where I had to make a change in life. I had to move on. I had to get out. I had to break out.
Right. Interesting. This is a bit of a getting a little bit sidetracked, but you mentioned your lack of a Rebbe at that point. It's something that actually came up in a recent episode, the importance of having a Rebbe. So you tell us, like, were you trying to speak to local Rabbanim and you felt that they weren't able to understand you, or there was some other issue there that was preventing you from being able to access that resource?
Well, without getting into politics or whatever it may be, just over the years, there were Rabbanim that I liked, who if I had a question, I had to go to, but I didn't feel the spiritual connection with any Rabbanim there. There were Rabbanim there that I trusted and that I enjoyed hearing their Divrei Torah, but I never felt like, it says a Seilach Harav. I just didn't feel that there was I feel like there has to be like a give and take between a Rebbe and a Talmud. And I didn't feel that connection. So fast forward, when we didn't really do a pilot trip. We were allowed to come to Israel because we had a grandchild. There were different allowances. So when I was here, I sat down. We finally decided on Beit Shemesh, and I sat down with a lot of Rabbanim in the area. We didn't decide. We didn't buy a house yet, and we didn't yet know which shul we would belong to. But after meeting Rav Elimelech Kornfeld, I knew right away it was love at first sight. I felt that he cared about me, and I cared about him, and I felt that he was very aligned with my entire journey of, growing up in Boston to where I was today, really understanding me and really feeling who we are as a family. And I really felt that connection. There's a beautiful shul there, a beautiful community. The age group is also similar to us. Obviously, I'm almost 50 years old. And likewise, it wasn't just a whole bunch of young guys who were, serious about davening and learning. And I really found we joined the kehillah Sakra, who Rebbe Elimelech Kornfeld is the Rav of the shul, and I really, to this day, I feel that he's there. Everyone in the shul, everyone has a simcha or le'aleinu, a tragedy. He's there for you. He's just everything a Rav is meant to be, and I'm so excited. Every day I'm excited about it, and to know that he's my Rav, and he's someone that I can depend on, and he's really my connection to, I guess, not to Hashem, but yeah, in a way he is. He's everything. Whenever we have a question, whether it's an halacha or hashkafa or just need advice, he's just there for you. He's just there for us. So we're super happy about that.
I'm happy for you. It's special to hear that transition between feeling a little bit lost and finding that connection, and it's great. So what are the takeaways for someone who wants to find that Rebbe that's there for them, that connects to them? Or alternatively, if there are rabbis listening to this who they want to be there for the Baal Batim, but they maybe just feel like they're they're missing a little bit in being able to forge that connection. What are some of the takeaways that you would put your finger on?
Well, I would say that to encourage Aliyah, there is you go to I don't want to compare it to an ice cream store, but there's a flavor for everybody, and especially in Beit Shemesh, it's extremely diverse. From one end to the other end of the spectrum, there are kehillos that are available to people, because obviously people aren't going to change and rabbis aren't going to change, and if you understand, I mean, I understand that the rabbis are not beholden to their balabatim. Balabatim are beholden to their rav. When you make yourself a rav, you decide that you're listening to him, and you don't get to pick and choose at that point. Whether you like or you don't like what he has to say. You make yourself a rav, and you don't have to think twice. He's there for you. Obviously, no one's infallible, but when you get to someone that you really trust, you don't have to second guess every single time, even if it's uncomfortable. You listen to your rav because he's your rav, and you trust that he knows better than you. And that's it. So, but I think that I think Beit Shemesh is extremely diverse. There's
Okay, great.
literally the entire spectrum is available.
Amazing. Okay, so always happy to plug Beit Shemesh, great town. Grew up there, and it's really wonderful. And a lot of Olim friends of mine now are making Aliyah and having a great experience transitioning from Cork Cellar to Beit Shemesh. So that's really wonderful to hear. So let's go back to your Aliyah story. You alluded to this before as you started to prepare back in Canada for your Aliyah. It was really about selling your house, selling your business, wrapping everything up. So tell me about that decision. Was that something that you considered, maybe leaving some of your doors open to come back to Montreal if things wouldn't work out? How did you decide to go all in and really burn all the bridges?
Well, there's a story, and I don't know if it's true or not, but there was a war, and there was a general who came to attack the country on a fleet of ships. And when he saw that his army was losing the battle on the coast, he set fire to his ships. And when the soldiers on the ground saw behind them that their fleet was burned and sunk, and that there was no heading home, they fought onwards and upwards, and they were ultimately victorious. And I feel that, when people tell me, why do you sell your house? Why don't you just rent it out to someone else? Why don't you keep your business and run it from a distance? When I made the decision to move to Israel, I wanted to make sure that there was no coming back. I wanted to make sure that I gave it my all. So we sold our house, and I sold my business, and I said, that's it. I'm not coming back. I know why I'm moving to Israel. It's the place that I belong. And once I get there and go through everything to get there, I'm not going to come back. So for me, there was no question. I didn't want to leave the door open, because when you get to Israel, you have to totally flip your way of looking at life. You have to flip your understanding of what material wealth is. It's a totally different culture. You have to change everything about yourself. And if you are even considering turning around and coming back and saying, hey, listen, if it doesn't work out, we can always come back, I don't think you'll be able to give it your all. It's just something that's something that doesn't work.
Were you
So
worried about parnassah?
I made sure that there was no coming back.
Were you worried about your parnassah?
Yes, but you develop an extremely new sense of bitachon and amuna about parnassah. I think that you need to make a plan. I don't think you can just show up here with empty pockets and expect things to work out. It probably won't work out. You need to make a plan. Now, whenever you invest in a new business or you start a new job, you don't know if it's going to work out. So I guess you can call that worried. So I formulated a business. I came up with a business plan. I spoke to a bunch of people. I got some investors, and I came with a plan. Now, the plan that I made didn't exactly work out exactly how I intended to work out. But I would tell people that you need to make a plan. You can't just come empty-handed. Now, if you're a professional, and obviously if you can work remotely, you don't have to change anything about your life. Nothing's going to change for you. If you're a professional, whether you're a doctor or a lawyer, and you want to get certified to, come to Israel and work here in Israel as an Israeli, obviously you're going to have Hebrew. For me, I'm not a 9 to 5 kind of guy. I can't punch a clock. I need to be my own boss. I need to run a business. The part that didn't work out is basically, and I went in the same direction, but I've had to pivot, especially 2 months after I got my business open, the war started. And my entire business originally was totally dependent on tourism. And tourism fell through a crack. So obviously, you got to survive. You gotta keep on moving. But I think if you have the attitude that you understand that life is not smooth and there are bumps in life, and if you have that attitude, I believe that you can make it work anywhere. But it's definitely worth to come armed with a plan. You have direction.
Right. So I do want to hear more about that plan and the cracks in the plan and the pivots, which we're going to get into in a moment. But you did say something very interesting. You spoke about how Aliyah is a complete mindset shift, whether it's your bitachon and your headspace. So I like that a lot, and I want to maybe challenge it a little bit, because one of these stigmas about Beit Shemesh is that people come there, they can live in Israel but not be Israeli. They want to sort of retain so much of their American life while being physically on the land of Eretz Yisrael. Whereas you're coming and saying you did move to Beit Shemesh, but you also had this seismic shift in your outlook. So you talk a little more how you've experienced that, or how you've seen other people come to Beit Shemesh. And on the one hand, it's understandable to try to transition with the comforts of American life, but also understanding, no, there's something really deep here. And if you're not ready to make that mindset shift, you're not doing Aliyah properly.
Well, listen, people joke and say that there were no missile landings in Beit Shemesh because Trump told Hamas that he can't attack any American targets. So if you really, really love America, so stay in America. If you love America but understand that you don't belong there, you belong in Israel, so make Aliyah. Coming to Beit Shemesh, your transition will be easier because there are a lot of Americans. If more people would make Aliyah, the transition would be even better, easier. There would be more financial opportunities. The schools would change, and we can get into that later. Everything would be different if a wholesome amount of people would come and move here. It would change the flavor. But you have to understand that even though you come to Beit Shemesh and there's a lot of Americans here, it's still Israel. You're still going to have to deal with Hebrew. You're going to have to deal with schools. You're going to have to deal with the government. You want to get a driver's license or a passport, or you just want to go on a vacation somewhere. Most people you're going to deal with really can't communicate in English. You have to understand that the driving is different. The attitude of, whether it's rude or not to block a street. American ideas and manners just don't apply here. I don't think Israelis are rude. I just think that they're totally different. And America is a totally different animal. So you have to understand, if you've only come to Israel on vacation and you stayed at the Waldorf, you don't understand what Israel is at all, because you had someone pick you up, you had someone drive you, you didn't have to deal with traffic or delays or complications or getting a flat tire. You just never had to deal with that. But once again, that's regular daily life. I mean, even if you live in New York, you're going to have a flat tire. You're going to have to deal at one point with getting pulled over by the police or going to a government office or a doctor's office. It's just, you have to understand it's different, and you can't expect everything to stay the same. You have to understand that. I mean, my wife, since my kids were babies, she would always tell them that Eretz Yisrael is where we belong and where that's our place for us, and we just don't live there yet. So they understood when we came here. Then I think that I think the only taina that I have, I don't blame someone for growing up in America. I did also. But I think the attitude where people are not taught that ultimately Eretz Yisrael is our final destination is where we get into problems. Because if people understood that, and people understood that we have to get to Eretz Yisrael, you don't have to get into all the geula talk and all the doomsday talk, and you don't have to get into any of that. Even if everything stays status quo, everyone has to know that Eretz Yisrael is a place where a Jew belongs, where he has the best learning, doing the best mitzvahs. And it's a gift that Hashem gave us. We say it every single day in Shema. We say it in, it's everywhere. And just like people just, kindly skip over that. They don't learn Tanakh. Yeshiva system doesn't teach Tanakh. I mean, some parts of the school system do teach, but the Haredi system does not teach it at all. And at minimum, they don't tell anyone that Eretz Yisrael is where we belong. So the attitude, and everyone's saying, wow, why don't more people make Aliyah? It's because no one ever told them. It's like news. It's a total news flash that anyone should make Aliyah, and that has to change. But obviously, you also have to understand that just helps you understand in your mind that there's a next step that has to be taken. Once you get here, you have to realize it's a different country. This country's only been around for 75 years, and they haven't figured out everything that America's figured out. Like I always say, like you can't even like mail a letter without making an appointment at the post office. I mean, they built this country. You look at the skyline of Tel Aviv, and you see they've built skyscrapers out of the desert. But why can't they just figure out how how to mail a letter without a problem? Like, I don't know. They just haven't figured it out. It's like an American mind who's fully American doesn't understand Israel and will get very quickly frustrated and become angry. And every time you get in your car and try to drive down the street, you're just going to be miserable all the time. And you have to come here with an attitude that Israel is a different country. It's a place you're supposed to be. Nothing is perfect, and get with the program. It's called adopting. You change careers. You have to get used to a new culture in your office. So it's no different than that. You can't say, well, how come you're not like my old job? How come you're like my old office didn't do it like that? I don't know. They don't do it like that. These changes have to be made. You're literally going to the other side of the world, into the Middle East. Things are different over here.
So I really like that answer. And towards the end, you were talking about how like we're we're younger, we're still developing, which is certainly true. But in the beginning, when you started to describe the differences, you surprised me a little bit because you didn't say, it's worse and Eretz Yisrael in case be Surim and you have to deal with it. You said it's different and the manners are different and the life cycle, the lifestyle is different and the culture is different. You didn't say better or worse. You just said different. And then you continued to say it's just a mindset. It's a mindset. Is that a mindset you had to train yourself with, or was it a mindset you always had to be able to be so flexible and adaptive? Because it's very inspiring. It's very refreshing to hear. But I'm wondering if you can go a little more to where that comes from.
No, the mindset that I have today is not the same mindset I had when I got here. The mindset that I'm promoting right now is a mindset that will help someone survive. Because when I got here, my emunah and bitachon were nowhere near that. Now, when everyone throws this line around, as soon as you get here and you start having difficulties, they say, oh, Eretz Yisrael's nikna b'yisurim. First of all, I really think that Eretz Yisrael's nikna b'kesef. If you have money over here, that solves almost every issue. You do observe that people get here and they start having issues. And I believe very intently that Hashem, when you get to Hashem's holy land, we know it's a land that spits out the people that don't belong here and absorbs the people that do belong here. And I believe that there is a spiritual purification process that has to happen when a person gets to Eretz Yisrael. And whether you like it or not, you're put through the washing machine and you need to develop as a survival technique, emunah bitachon, which we should have had all along. We should have had it from day one, even before we got here. But the attitude of that everything, that Hashem's in control of everything, and you definitely feel it more over here. You need to have that. You can't continue with an American mindset and come to Eretz Yisrael, because Eretz Yisrael will teach you who's boss. Hashem's boss. So, once again, everything that happens in a person's life is obviously meant to be, but your entire mental health is fully based on how you observe things around you. Meaning a simple thing can ruin your day, or a simple thing could make your day. You find a parking spot or you don't find a parking spot. It's a difference between, it's all about attitude. And attitude is created through emunah and bitachon, the way you observe the world around you. So, you ultimately have to get to that point of understanding that it's only Hashem that rules the world. And it's not your bank account and it's not your people that you know. It's just you and Hashem, and you have that relationship. And every time you daven, you understand that you're developing that relationship further. And as far as I'm concerned, no matter where you are in life, you're not going to be happy unless your attitude aligns with those ideas of trusting in Hashem and believing in Hashem. And that's the beginning and the end of everything. So if you can work on that before you get here, matovu manaim. But, if you just show up here and you expect things to work out because you're American, or because, you're paying for something, or just because, hey, I have an American passport, no one really cares. It's just, you become one of, another 7 or 8 million people who live here, and you need to make it work. It boils down to your relationship between you and Hashem, whether when things work out or don't work out for you, whether you get upset about it or you say, hey, that's what Hashem wanted. I'm fine with it,
There's so many important points that you're bringing up and so much to talk about here, but I do want to get back to your story. You said that you came with a business plan that didn't really work because of the war, but maybe just tell us about where the idea came from, what the idea was, what the business, how it launched, and what was the first iteration before October 2023.
So before I got here, I mean, I'm a big wine guy. I don't have any official certifications or licenses to comment on wine. But wine was always a big thing. I was a wine hobbyist. I was always buying and selling wine in my house in Montreal. And I guess one day I woke up and I came up with this idea called Cork Cellar, where I saw that a lot of people come to Israel. They want to visit wineries and they want to bring wines back home with them. And they're always coming to Israel. And they don't necessarily own a house here. So my concept originally is that I build a facility where there are private cellars, kind of like a U-Haul storage, but where people who are always coming back to Israel and always plan on coming back to Israel, can store their wine. Because a lot of times, you visit a winery, the wine that's released now is not really meant to be drunk right now. It's really meant to be had in a few years from now. And I mean, simply put, having a wine cellar is an asset class for a lot of people, besides for being a hobby. And I said, let me create this idea where, you can keep your wine cellar. You can order from, you're part of wine clubs in Israel. You can order from your wine clubs. It'll come to my facility. I'll store it for you. And you have a secure wine cellar here in Israel and it's available to you whenever you want. And I did my market research. I spoke to a lot of different people and they said that was an amazing idea. They'd love it. They pay a monthly fee. And whenever they needed their wines, we would get it out to them. And it was a great idea. It was super, super cool idea. But by the time I built the facility, built up my inventory, it was October 7th. So everything came, my business plan came crashing down. And I very quickly, everyone who said that they were ready to sign up says, hey, listen, even if I can get to Israel, no one's throwing big parties. No one's, there are hatufim, there are people being killed every day, and no one's just in the mood to drink. And it's just like, I'll drink wine quietly, but I'm not gonna, I'll just go to the store and get it. Like, so all of a sudden I became very, I'm not gonna say worthless, but I became very irrelevant as far as that entire concept was concerned. So I very quickly had to figure out what to do because even though I came here with a bunch of money, I bought a house, I bought a car, I did renovations, I started living, and when you start up a business, you're not really making money right away. The savings account was very quickly dwindling, and I said, listen, I have to make money over here. I built this whole thing; it's beautiful. I have tons of inventory, but I really have nothing to do with it. So I'm not getting into every single detail of where it went, but I started focusing more on Israelis or Americans who were living here, getting them what they needed, advising them what to buy or what to invest in. And then I had a breakthrough where I had a friend of mine who's a tour guide, brought someone over from New Jersey, and he said, listen, I love what you have here. I want to buy a lot of it, but you need to ship it back to me to America. And I said, I have no idea how to do that. It sounds very complicated. I just finished making Aliyah, and paperwork's not my thing. He said, listen, if you figure it out, let me know. I'll send you the money and you'll ship it to me. So thank God, through a lot of siyata d'shmaya, I was able to figure it out very quickly. I started shipping to United States, private customers who wanted to buy bottles that weren't available in the States, collectors, people who had big wine cellars already in their houses in the United States. And that kept me going for a while until I met through Facebook a fellow in Omaha, Nebraska, who's not Jewish. And he said, listen, I see what you're doing. I love Israel. I love wine. Can you get me Israeli wine? I see online, I always buy the same stuff. I love supporting Israel, but it's the same stuff over and over again. And I feel like there's a lot of wine in Israel that I'm not able to get to. Can you help me? Can you get me a box of wine every month at my house? I'm happy to pay for it. And through that idea, the Cork Cellar Wine Club was born, where, I worked with Brian Wallace, who you said that you know him, and we put together this whole concept of a Israeli boutique wine club for United States. Basically, I only send wines that are not sold in the United States. Any wine that I send, you can't buy in the United States. If you're one of my members, you're the only one who has that bottle of wine in the United States. And I saw it as a way also to support small wineries who aren't able to export. And I saw it as a way to bridge the gap to customers who would love to try them. And also, scaled into tourism where these people would finally come to visit Israel. Or, some people join the club just to discover new wineries so that when they are planning to come, they know where they're to visit. It's not, it's not the classic big wineries that everyone's heard of that are very commercialized, whereas they can go to, like I have a friend in Eish Kodesh, Yaakov. He has a winery called Gad Basela. And the winery, he dug it out of the, under the foundation of his house, in the Yishuv, and he built this winery. He picks the grapes with his kids, and they make the wine, and it's fantastic wine. I've sent hundreds and hundreds of his bottles to the United States to people who started discovering him. I'm actually heading there tonight. We're gonna open a few bottles tonight. But he's a great guy, and he's just an example of this greatness that if it weren't for me, his bottles would never see the light in the United States. And I'm so happy. It's an honor for me to bring his wines to people who appreciate them. So that, that's kind of where my business took me until now.
So it's very interesting because you weren't coming with any sort of grand idealistic plans of being a source of value to these small Israeli winemakers. But here you are, right? Akash Baruch Hu made it so that you're sort of natural source for a parnassah that you could enjoy and be successful in, led you to this very valuable resource for Eretz Yisrael, for Yeshiva Aretz. So have you seen that happen with others as well, where Akash Baruch Hu allows them to start with their more modest goals, but ends up bringing something a little more meaningful and valuable?
Well, I would put it this way. Whatever is supposed to happen will happen. And in Eretz Yisrael, it happens a lot quicker. You definitely I personally feel the connection to Hashem, asking Hashem for something and seeing the answers. I feel like Hashem, like we say, his eyes are on the land of Eretz Yisrael from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. ultimately, you see people who come here with one career who end up with another career. I just recently saw Rabbi Cronenberg. He started a yeshiva called Yesod Yisrael for Olim only in Beit Shemesh. It's his first year there. My son is there, and if you go to these job fairs, you have people who come and say, "Listen, I was a doctor, and now I got involved in making chocolate, and I love my life, and I'm so happy, and I don't have to work 18 hours a day anymore, and it's delicious, and I help people, and I make people happy." It's like as if you get here and you kind of have to let go. When you get to pull into a car wash, you kind of let go of the steering wheel and it kind of guides you through. So you get cleaned up. Eretz Yisrael kind of like washes away all of the, your old ideas and your attitudes. And if you let go and you let Hashem kind of rinse you clean, you let things go where they may. And I think ultimately with the right attitude, everyone here ends up with happy. Now, I think the elephant in the room, if you want to let go and become, if you're used to having a two-car garage and 8 bedrooms and a Shabbos table that seats 28 people, you have to obviously be ready to downsize. I mean, obviously there are opportunities where you can have such a property in Eretz Yisrael, but if that's your ikar of life and that's really what you need, once again, stay in America. Eretz Yisrael teaches you through this car wash process and you come to value the important things in life, and you realize that you don't need all of that. Of course, there are beautiful apartments you can get here. You will not have the same SUV. You won't have the same, options for vacations. Obviously, you can travel wherever you want. But I think that really what you learn over here is to be happy with less and to actually be happy, not just to pretend that you are happy because you have a lot. And I'm not just saying this because I don't have a lot. I really believe that part of the cleansing process that happens here in Yisrael is that you learn to appreciate the more important things in life. And once again, that enables you to still be happy with less. And that is, once again, the emun and bitachon. It doesn't mean that anyone who comes here won't succeed. There are countless people who exceed unbelievably financially. But once again, you start seeing when, after you wake up every morning and you look out your window, like I wake up and I see Hare Yehuda. And if I look to the west, I can see the coast of Ashdod and Ashkelon and Tel Aviv from my bedroom window. You start your day differently. When you walk outside on your way to shul and you're breathing emunah and you're surrounded by fruit trees, you just feel like you're being surrounded by Hashem and you feel a blessing and you feel that life is more meaningful and the daily grind comes to a grinding halt and you start living your life on a more elevated level. So I think that's all the value. I think that's everything. That's literally everything there is to life. And coming to Eretz Yisrael helps you get there. But it doesn't come. It's not pain-free. Obviously, anything that's great in life is difficult. Having a great marriage takes a lot of work. Running a great business takes a lot of work. It's not something that just comes easily. It definitely needs the understanding. You have to come in with that same attitude I mentioned before. You have to come in with the attitude that things will not be easy. And we're not just saying that. They really won't be easy. But when you understand that Hashem runs the world and you are letting go, things suddenly do become in your mind a lot easier. And your entire reality is really all in your mind. All of the peripherals are just distractions to what really has to happen. And I think that, just as a balabas, as a father, as a husband, starting my day every morning, instead of running to the office for 9 a.m., when most of my customers are still sleeping, it's the middle of the night, I'm able to sit and learn. And not just do daf yomi in 6 minutes or 30 minutes or 45 minutes. I'm actually able to spend some time in Beis Medrash and appreciate life. So I think that, all around, just to sum it up, it's not easy. You're going to have to deal with deal with less gashmiyus, as it's called, but your quality of life is far beyond any quality of life that's possible in the United States. But once again, I'm not judging quality of life by bank balance or by assets. I'm judging quality of life by actual spiritual benefits and actual enjoyment that you have. So that's where I get off. That's really where that's where when every time things are rough over here, you remember and you refocus and you say that you remind yourself why you're here.
So I want to follow up about the gashmiyus point and also about your learning, which we're going to get to in a moment. Before that, I do want to appreciate and say thank you for that mashal of the car wash, which I really enjoy, especially because every time I go to a car wash, I'm absolutely terrified of taking my foot off the brake and my hand off the wheel. It's a very scary experience for someone like me. So I certainly appreciate the mashal, and the point is very much well taken. So about the downgrade in gashmiyus, I want to talk about that a little bit more, because you specifically, mentioned that your business is about fine wines and people enjoy that, and that's fine. I'm not against that, but there is sort of a nuance here which has to be had, which is that on the one hand, you're shifting your focus and your gosh, it's not everything in life. On the other hand, you can still enjoy a nice wine. You can still enjoy some of the finer things in life. So talk a little bit about making sure that we have that nuanced perspective of what's really important, what's not important, but also, yeah, it's okay to be a wine connoisseur and to enjoy those things, even though it is officially under the rubric of gashmiyus.
Yeah, I don't think, I just think there needs to be a transfer of what gashmiyus is. I think there's a tremendous amount of gashmiyus over here, but ultimately, as Jews, as we bridge between the Eastern and Western religions of the world, when we believe that every bit of gashmiyus is meant to be elevated and intrinsically is ruchnius, I think that when you sip a wine in Cedarhurst, it's different than when you sip a wine overlooking a sunset over the Golan. I feel that everyone's obsessed with sunset pictures. I mean, everywhere you go, there's just like beautiful mountains and trees. And you start realizing that gashmiyus is it's not a brand name that's on your clothing or on your car or on your watch. It's just totally different. It's just a whole different idea. No one's saying that you have to come over here and become a saint and swear off gashmiyus and just be totally spiritual. I think that the simple things in life that are so much more accessible are become what is exciting. I mean, like for a kid growing up in the Five Towns or in Lakewood, a Cholamoid trip is going to a massive amusement park or having a concert. I think that kids over here, after being in Eretz Yisrael for a few years, you know, getting some ice creams, taking a trip, and then doing a barbecue by the side of a river and going swimming is so much more exciting and wholesome and fulfilling. No one's saying don't have a fun time, don't enjoy yourself. But life in Israel is not your 2 weeks in Israel during Sukkot in Yerushalayim. That's not reality. That's Six Flags for adults. Real life over here, we enjoy all the time. Sitting outside, in my backyard, seeing palm trees and having supper with my family, I think is far more valuable than going out to eat in Manhattan at a steakhouse. Okay. It just is. And I don't, if someone wants to tell me that it's not, I'll argue with them. It just is. And it's readily available. And when you are back down to the basics, more of your life becomes wholesome. And when you're busy, if you're not part of the elite and you're busy, spend all day on comparing, keeping up with the Joneses, that's kind of depressing. And that doesn't really lead to a happy lifestyle. It doesn't lead to happy parenting or, in that message that you give over to your kids. When you walk outside, you say, geshmak, what a beautiful night. Look at that sunset. And, say, oh, Eretz Yisrael is so beautiful. And I reach over and we pick a fruit from our fruit tree and we do hafrashas trumas and maestris and we enjoy a fresh fruit that we grew in our backyard. I don't think there's anything to compare to that. I think that's priceless. I don't think that experience can be matched anywhere. It's just, you don't, I'm not saying you cut down on gashmiyus. I'm saying you shift what your view of gashmiyus is.
So overall, I think that's very much true. I agree for the most part that the whole shkaf around gashmiyus is different here. I think that the nuance that you're adding to this conversation is very important, because oftentimes it can become this sort of mudslinging between like the Americans are all gashmiyus, the Israelis are all poor beggars and kollel. And I appreciate the more nuanced take that you have. I do want to put it on the record that I have a lot of friends in America who have a very healthy sense of values and spirituality and gashmiyus and have a nice balanced take. But I do certainly understand how Eretz Yisrael forces you into a little bit of a different mindset. So thank you for that as well. You mentioned your learning schedule, so I want to transition to that because we're getting a little bit low on time. Tell us a little bit about how Eretz Yisrael is conducive to that learning schedule in the mornings and how you have found yourself with meaningful Sadarim and Limudim throughout your career.
Well, I didn't, to be honest, when I lived in Montreal for many years, I wasn't learning at all what I was supposed to be. A friend of mine founded a new Daf Yomi shir, L'zecher Nishmas's brother who passed away in Gibraltar. He put up a sign everywhere saying you get a free Gemara if you join the Daf Yomi. And I said, hey, listen, if I stick to it for 7.5 years, I'll have a whole free Shas and art school Gemaras. I said, I was very excited about it. I joined the shir, and after about, 35 days, I said to him, remember to bring the new Gemaras tomorrow because we're starting a new volume in the art scroll. So he says, what are you talking about? It was only one free Gemara. I said, I only joined this Daf Yomi so that I get all the free Gemaras. He's like, no, you only get the first one for free. I said, oh my gosh. Okay, so, the sunken cost theory, I applied it and I said, okay, I'll stick to it. And I started buying them. And I was zoche to finish Shas when I was still in Montreal. And, it was right before COVID. And I realized that, it was such a high. It was an unbelievable feeling to finish Shas. And I said, I don't want to wait another 7.5 years for that. So I started doing, I had a friend who was doing something called Daf V'od Daf, where basically we started at the Sachas Brachas in the beginning. And I had a chavrusa we started at Gittin, kind of basically in the middle of Shas. And every day we did the Daf Yomi Daf and one Daf starting at the center point. And as we went through Shas, we kind of moved like that. And when the rest of the world of Daf Yomi got to the center, I was making and at that point, I went back to the beginning to Brachas, and then I continued with the rest, chazering from the center point toward the end, and then once again made another siyum. So thank God, I'm holding on my third cycle now of finishing Shas. And about 1.5 years ago, after I started meeting people, I didn't really know anyone when I got here. So I got a chavrusa, and we learn in a kehillah every single morning. As soon as the kids are off to school, I head over there, and I don't have to leave at a certain time. When we finish. We do the Daf Yomi, but Be'iyun we do with Rashi and Tosfos and Farshim, and I really enjoy it. And there's an unbelievable coffee machine there, so I have total gashmiyus. I got my cafe latte with 2 pumps of soy milk and pumpkin spice, and I sit there in kehillah, and we learn, and I have the spiritual Starbucks experience over here. And obviously when you start learning more about Hashem and Amun and bitachon, you get involved in the panimius Torah, which really we would call chasidus, but everyone's a little bit nervous. You're going to start dancing on top of a van and singing and things like that. No, there's a lot more to Yiddishkeit than I learned in the yeshiva world, and there's a lot more out there, and it's readily available. I mean, you just bump into plumbers and electricians and cabinet makers in Beit Shemesh, and these are guys who they're just huge Talmidei Chachamim. And your average Joe walking around with paint on his pants because he's painting a wall, this is a guy who spends his spare time learning, because Eretz Yisrael is different, and the spirituality that lives here is totally different. You can be stopped at a bus stop and just talk and learning with somebody. It's just it's a different experience here, and I hope I never get used to it, because every day it's so exciting, and I hope it never gets everyday kind of experience. Every day I look out my window and I see these mountains. I don't want to ever get used to that. I every single day I say, wow, thank you Hashem, just when I wake up. It's just a tremendous experience. I think that living here is just the best. You got to get over here, but change your attitude before you get here. Otherwise, it won't be the best.
Okay, so we are out of time. This has been a fantastic conversation with so much inspiration and insights, and I really appreciate it. It really gives me personally a boost, and I'm sure the listeners are going to enjoy it as well. So let's go to our lightning round. 3 short questions, 3 hopefully short answers. We're in the winter. We have these nice long Friday nights. What do you like to do at that time?
I like to get my favorite book that I bought, and whether it's Emun and Bitachon or great stories, and I read the stories and I cry along with them, and I get a big chizik from that. I do not waste my time going to sleep. If I get a chance to learn with my kids, but we enjoy a good Jewish book that we're waiting to read.
Okay, amazing. And when you come to Parsha Shavua, you want to learn something that inspires you, that stokes you up. What type of sefer on the Parsha are you looking towards?
I spend most of my Parsha time on Shnai Mikrecha Targum. I stick to Rashi, and I love the Balaturim. A lot of inspiration for the Balaturim, all the gematrias, and that he was able to do that without AI. That he actually knew everything in every gematria and every Rosh Tevos and Sefer Tovos, and I'm just always blown away by that. That the Chazal had AI before AI had AI.
And if you're forced to leave your current role, your business, your position, and choose some other job, business, career, something you've never done before, maybe something you dreamed of doing as a kid, what would that be?
Astronaut? I don't know. You got me there on the third question. I'm just happy with what I'm doing right now, and I'm not looking for anything else. I'm settled. I've arrived. I'm here in Israel, and I'm not looking to go anywhere else. The grass is not greener anywhere else. It's right here in front of you, and I have zero thought of going or doing anything else.
All right, you're not the first one to get tripped up by that question, but Eli Freedman, thank you so much for joining us. People can find you on LinkedIn or online, the Cork Cellar Wine Club, and so thank you so much for coming on today, and we look forward to being in touch in the future.
All the best. Kol Tov.
Thank you.